Here it is, the Recoil energy absorbing dual stage buffering recoil spring guide rod assembly for high power pistols. And that's what we're here to introduce today. I'm Mark Allen with VH Spring Solutions, and it is the end of April 2019 as we're making this video, and we have successfully prototyped, tested, and now have moved to manufacturing stage the dual stage buffering recoil spring guide rod. And we have this part of our testing video of all of the rounds that we shot through the different high power pistols using this guide rod, which buffers the recoil. And we're going to explain just exactly how it all works and what the benefits of it are. But this is a game changer for high power shooters. We have this video of my father. He's 3 weeks from being 79 years old as we did this, the end of our testing of the dual stage recoil spring guide rod. And we have this video, and he's shooting two-handed and one-handed, and what you see is the pistol staying much more flat, and you see the recoil being more absorbed by the pistol. And that is the primary benefit, the primary performance benefit of the buffering or recoil energy absorbing dual stage recoil spring guide rod. This is such a performance part and so easy. And it also answers a question of what's going to become of existing high power pistols when existing recoil spring guide rods as replacement parts dry up. These things have a limited life, as we have found, and I'm going to demonstrate a little bit about that too. But first of all, to this new product that we are so proud to be introducing to our high power friends, comes packaged looking just like this. Inside you have the dual stage recoil spring guide rod assembly. I'm going to show that to you here in just a moment, and 3 buffering springs. We'll explain why we have 3 buffering springs, heavy, medium, and light buffering. And this dual stage recoil spring guide rod, I'm going to show it up close on the video, looks just like this. You'll notice the end that mounts with the barrel in the slide is identical to an OEM, has the ball to influence the slide stop, where the slide stop does go through here. And then we have looks a little different, and we have a piston action basically, and you're going to see that there is a buffering spring inside here. Now, the way this works is when this is installed in your high power, what happens, and you're going to see it installs just like your regular recoil spring guide rod. What happens is when your slide recoils and you get to within about 3/8 of an inch of final rearward slide travel, that's when your slide and your frame have this collision, and that's what causes muzzle flip, is that collision happening. And then the slide moves back forward into forward battery. That's the source primarily of what we call muzzle flip. So that's what takes the aim of your handgun off of your target while the slide is cycling, and then you have a need to get back on target. Well, if you can minimize that, you have drastically bettered performance and a host of other benefits, but that is primarily what it does and how it works. We have 3 different buffering springs. We have a video that talks about, or maybe towards the end of this video, that talks about why 3 buffering springs, what do you do with the 3 different buffering springs, how do you choose the one that's most optimal for you. Any buffering of this recoil is 100% more buffering than you get with conventional recoil spring guide rod. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about what is a downside of the OEM recoil spring guide rod. And other than the fact that it doesn't help buffer the slide velocity coming rearward whatsoever or help you with recoil, it does two jobs. It holds the recoil spring and it holds the slide stop in place, and it regulates or controls the positioning of the slide stop, if you will. And what I want to do is I want to demonstrate real quickly up close on the camera. Here is a 30-year-old FN Browning recoil spring guide rod. Here is a brand new one. And I'm going to try to demonstrate with a slide stop. We'll see how this works. I'm going to try to demonstrate this 30-year piece. You're going to watch this slide stop just slide right in. And now we're connected with the ball resistance, and you see it just easily slide right back out. In fact, it just kind of slides around in there. This recoil spring guide rod was starting to not positively hold the slide stop. Now, here's a brand new slide stop, and we encounter a lot more resistance from that ball on the slide stop. We have an affirmative positive hold, and it really takes a pull to get that slide stop released from the ball. The ball needs to exert enough influence on the slide stop to hold the slide stop down when you have ammunition in your magazine, and at the same time allow it to cam up by influence from the magazine follower when the magazine is empty. Inside these guide rods there is a captured spring. These guide rods were put together, fused together in the middle. They are a two-piece with a captured spring inside. You can never replace it. So in other words, what this means is this is a 30-year-old guide rod. It was starting to fail to control the positioning of the slide stop, and you can probably understand why just from my little demonstration. The spring inside this recoil spring guide rod is started to degrade. It's started to lose its strength. And there's nothing I can do about that. You cannot take this apart. You cannot replace that spring. You have no choice except to replace it with a new part. The bad news is these parts are not being imported into the United States anymore by anyone. I'm talking about the FN Browning or any other manufacturer's recoil spring guide rods for the high power. So high power owners should make a plan, have a plan for what am I going to do in my high powers when my OEM recoil spring guide rod is worn out and past its useful life and needs to be replaced. One option is an OEM, and I'd certainly consider having one of these in the toolbox. On the other hand, this new dual stage recoil spring guide rod is a lifetime part. The buffering spring inside the piston is right here. It's replaceable. That is a hard working spring, and we're going to explain a little more about that. There's also a spring in this end of the guide rod that provides influence on that ball. It also is replaceable. In other words, there's nothing on this part to wear out. And it is considered to be a very lifetime kind of a solution, lifetime part in a high power pistol because of the replaceable springs. So that's one problem that is solved by this new dual stage recoil spring guide rod. It is a solution for the limited life OEM part, the recoil spring guide rod from every manufacturer who's made high powers. This part is usable in FNs, Brownings, FEGs, Arcuses, high powers, Careens, the Tissos Regent BR9, all of them that had a recoil spring guide rod made that looks like this, which as far as we know everybody copied that one. This one will drop in and replace it, and it's going to up your performance, and it's tunable with 3 different springs. What this does is it enhances the shooter's accuracy, enhances the shooter's efficiency or speed in getting back on target for follow-up shots. It enhances the shooter's comfort Obviously, if you're buffering that recoil, you're not taking as much of the energy. It increases the shooter's confidence, and it can extend the service life of your high power because you're buffering that critical collision point when the slide fully comes back against the frame. Now, we want to talk about some of the finer design points of this guide rod, because contrary to what you might think at first of, oh, if I buffer the recoil, I'm probably going to have to downgrade my recoil spring. Not likely. And we have a tutorial video about selecting the right recoil spring, then selecting your buffering spring, and to make sure that you have the optimal performance equation in those springs. It's very easy. Generally, guys that are already using the right recoil spring in your high power pistol, you don't need to change anything. You're just going to put this in as a part, and you're going to enjoy easier to control, softer shooting firearm. So we're going to go ahead and put this one together and explain some of the finer points about the function of this guide rod. Now, you remember the guide rod is now installed, and when the slide recoils after the bullet is fired, the slide begins to recoil, and when the slide gets to within about 3/8 of an inch of full rearward slide travel, you eject your empty shell casing. In other words, that's the point where your ejected empty shell casing hits the ejector, and you see on your videos it's flipping out of the pistol in the air. At that point, one of the critical jobs of the recoil of the slide travel rearward has happened. You have ejected successfully the spent shell casing, preparing for the next round to be chambered. And at approximately that very point, when you eject that empty shell casing, the slide encounters the buffering spring. And the farther the slide gets rearward, the more resistance you have happening or buffering the slide's rearward travel. Two reasons. Number one, you're getting to the high strength point of the recoil spring, because now the recoil spring, the big spring, it's as compressed almost as it's going to get. That's the point where it's exerting the most resistance and the most strength. So that's a plus. But then the slide's rearward travel encounters that additional buffering spring in the recoil spring guide rod, and it's substantial buffering on that rearward recoil. So we've gotten past the extraction point. We've successfully done that. The slide encounters the buffering spring in the recoil spring guide rod. The slide continues to travel rearward fully. And now we have another interesting thing happening, and this is cool because this gets to reliability and function, because this guide rod also optimizes reliability and function. And here's how. Once your slide is fully in the rearward position, your slide's job is half done. Now it has more critical jobs to do, and your recoil spring has to do this, and the buffering spring in the recoil in the dual stage guide rod is going to help. That is, when you're all the way back, now the recoil spring and the buffering spring are exerting their maximum energy forward, right at the point where the slide needs to strip the next round out of the magazine. Another way to see this equation, if you've ever put too strong of a recoil spring into a high power pistol, you may have had what is called a short cycle. In other words, where you may have gotten the empty shell case ejected, but the slide's rearward travel didn't get back all the way far enough to get fully behind that next round in the magazine, and the slide fails to come forward. It fails to strip the round out of the magazine. That would be what happens when you have too much recoil spring. When you have the right recoil spring and this buffering system, you have gone all the way back, and at this point you have extra energy coming back forward to make that round leave the magazine, even if it's a fully packed magazine and it's tight in that magazine, the top round. You're going to have extra push forward to positively strip that round out of the magazine, which is the first part of the equation of successfully forcing the round into now the chamber of the barrel. And then finally, the slide must push forward, pushing the extractor over the rim of the ammunition casing now in the chamber and fully seat forward. So what I've just explained is this buffering action of the spring, it has actually more than one functional job. It picks up the slide's rearward velocity right when you need it most. It buffers that final rearward slide travel. It gives you more affirmative push forward to strip the round out of the chamber and positively bring the slide back into battery. Performance, function, and reliability, this is an upgrade, a betterment on all fronts. So this is the recoil energy absorbing, dual stage, buffering, recoil spring guide rod. This is a BH Performance part. This is a co-branded product, BH Spring Solutions and EFK Fire Dragon. EFK Fire Dragon is the manufacturer of the hard parts. BH Spring Solutions is the manufacturer of the spring components. And BH Spring Solutions is the final assembly, the final quality control point and packaging point for this product. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are very proud to be introducing this product.